Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going to decode a pretty revolutionary idea about what makes you, you. We're talking about a theory that looks past our day-to-day choices and right into our biological code. So, let's start with a classic question. Are you an extrovert or an introvert? You've probably asked yourself this a bunch of times, right? Are you the kind of person who gets totally energized by a big crowd, or do you need a quiet room and maybe a good book to really recharge? But here's the kicker. Have you ever stopped to wonder why? I mean, really why? Well, that simple question is exactly what drove the psychologist Hans Eysenck. See, he wasn't content with just labeling behaviors. He wanted to get to the root cause, and he had a hunch the answer was hiding deep inside our biology. Okay, so let's set the stage. When Eysenck came along, thinking about personality was, well, it was kind of fuzzy. Lots of abstract ideas, a lot of speculation. He looked at all that and thought, we can do better. He wanted to make it scientific, something you could actually measure. And you can see the contrast right here. He was pretty skeptical of ideas like Freud's, theories that you couldn't really prove or disprove. So he pushed for a whole new way of thinking, one that was all about things you could actually test. Statistical analysis, hard numbers, and real biological evidence. So, how did he explain that whole extraversion thing? What was his big why? Well, Eysenck's big idea was that it all comes down to a kind of thermostat inside our brain, one that controls our basic level of alertness. He called it arousal theory. And the core idea is this. There's a part of your brainstem, the reticular activating system, or RAS for short, and it basically acts like a volume dial for your brain. It sets your default level of alertness, which he called cortical arousal. Now, here's where it gets really cool and a little counterintuitive. According to this theory, introverts aren't necessarily shy or antisocial. It's just that their brains are already running at a high level of arousal. So they avoid more stimulation because it would be overwhelming. Extroverts, they're the exact opposite. Their brains have a low baseline arousal, so they're out there actively looking for excitement, parties, new people, adventures, just to get their brains up to a comfortable level. All right, so extroversion, introversion, that was just the start. It was really just one piece of a much, much bigger puzzle that Eysenck was putting together. He was trying to map the entire landscape of human personality. So after crunching just a massive amount of data, he came up with 3 core dimensions of personality. He called them super factors, and you might know them today by the acronym PEN. Okay, let's break these down. N stands for neuroticism, which is basically a measure of your emotional stability. Think of it like your internal emotional alarm system. Eysenck believed this was tied to how reactive your nervous system is to stress. So if you score high on this scale, you might be more prone to things like anxiety or mood swings. And then there's P for psychoticism. Now, this one sounds a little intense, but it's not about being psychotic. It's more about traits like being impulsive, maybe a bit egocentric or nonconforming. Eysenck linked this dimension to things like our hormone levels, especially androgens and dopamine. This table here does a great job of laying it all out. You can see the high and low ends of each of the 3 scales, and the key thing to remember is that these are spectrums, right? It's not about being either impulsive or empathetic. It's about where you land on that scale. Your unique personality is a combination of your scores on all 3 of these dimensions. So, you've got these big super factors, but how do they actually connect to, our everyday actions, like telling a joke or deciding to stay home on a Friday night? Well, Eysenck came up with a really elegant 4-level framework to explain just that. And here it is. It's like a pyramid. At the very bottom, you have a specific, one-time action. Let's say you laugh at a joke. Do that kind of thing over and over, and it becomes a habitual response. You're the person who often jokes with friends. A bunch of similar habits, like being chatty and liking parties, group together to form a trait, like sociable. And finally, all those related traits bundle together to form that big super factor at the top, in this case, extraversion. It all builds from the ground up. Okay, a scientific theory is great, but if you can't measure it, what's the point, right? So naturally, Eysenck didn't just come up with a theory. He actually built the tool to go along with it. He developed what's called the Eysenck Personality Questionnaire, or the EPQ for short. It's a pretty straightforward test, where you just answer yes or no to a series of questions. The whole point was to have an objective, efficient way to see where someone falls on his personality map. So, what does it measure? Well, no surprise, it gives you a score for extraversion, neuroticism, and psychoticism. But Eysenck added something really smart, a fourth scale called the lie scale. This was designed to catch people who might not be answering honestly, maybe trying to make themselves look good. It's a little built-in truth detector to make the results more reliable. This all leads to a huge and kind of heavy question. If these fundamental personality traits are baked into our biology, how much can we really change? Are we just playing out a script written by our DNA? Well, Eysenck's research, particularly his work with identical twins, was pretty mind-blowing. He found that twins who were separated at birth and raised in totally different homes still ended up with incredibly similar personalities. So for him, the answer was clear. Our genes don't just influence who we are, they actually set the boundaries for our personality. But, and this is a really important but, he wasn't saying we have no control at all. He wasn't a strict determinist. He absolutely believed that our environment, our upbringing, our life experiences, all of that stuff matters. It just matters in a specific way. It doesn't write our personality from scratch, but it does shape how our biological tendencies get expressed. You can think of it like this. Biology gives you the blueprint, but your life experiences are what actually build the house. Ultimately, Eysenck's work was a game changer for psychology. He really built a bridge between the person we see in the mirror and the complex biological code running underneath. And it leaves us with that huge lingering question. If so much of who we are is etched into our biology, what does that really mean for our ability to change and to grow?